Inside a massive forge, a blazing furnace burns at the top of a tall stone chamber. Orange light pours down the narrow stairway, filling the entire room with heat and drifting sparks. Footsteps echo through the corridor as someone slowly climbs the stairs. Tap, tap. A young blonde man steps into the furnace light. Embers float around him while the intense glow reflects across his calm yet unsettling face. His eyes quietly stare forward as the flames dance within them. Tap. A glowing sword is pulled straight from the blazing forge. The blade shines white-hot as flames coil around it, the metal releasing waves of scorching heat. The man's eyes suddenly sharpen. His expression twists into something far more sinister, a strange hunger appearing in his gaze as he stares at the burning blade. Without hesitation, he opens his mouth wide, revealing his teeth as he raises the red-hot sword toward his mouth. Then suddenly, crunch! He bites straight into the blazing sword. The metal shatters violently between his teeth as sparks and fragments explode outward. A broken shard of the sword flies into the roaring furnace, disappearing into the raging flames as the fire surges even higher. Ever since I was young, my father would often tell me a story. A towering portrait of a stern warrior holding a sword looms over a quiet hall. Two small figures stand beneath it, a father and his young son. His voice echoes softly as he speaks. Remember this well, Arhan. As a member of the Caravan family, this is a story you must remember. The man gently places his hand on the boy's head as they look up at the sword displayed on the wall. Although we may currently be living in this small village far from the capital, 200 years ago, our family's status was unmatched by any other. His voice carries pride as he recalls the past. We had a knight called the God of War, and righteous supervisors favored by the king and respected by everyone. The man continues, his gaze steady. Our family was chosen by the sword, and we produced swordmasters for generations. His hand softly pats the boy's head. That's why everyone treated them with respect. The blade gleams under the light as the words linger in the air. The invincible protectors. The father stands firmly beneath the portrait of the warrior. Caravan. He places a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. Arhan, you will take over my position and become the head of the Caravan family. Kneeling in front of him, the father grips the boy's shoulders, looking directly into his eyes as sunlight pours through the window behind them. You must always live with the pride of the Caravan family flowing through your veins. The two face each other in silence as the words sink in. To regain the family's glory and stand tall once more as the protector of this land. That is the duty of the Caravans. Morning sunlight spreads across a quiet village surrounded by golden wheat fields. The sky is clear, the wind gently brushing through the crops as the peaceful countryside stretches toward the distant mountains. The wheat sways softly under the bright sun. The heroic tales of our family that father used to tell me are probably just tall tales. Disgraced nobles clinging to their past glory. The curtain drops down over the window. That's a pretty common thing. The young man pauses, staring out over the field as the wind passes through the crops. If the stories about Caravan were true, we wouldn't be living in this poor village as landlords. Behind him, farmers continue working under the hot sun. We wouldn't be spending time doing farm work with the tenants every day. He casually points toward the crops with a relaxed smile. Should I stack this over there? A villager laughs. Yes, young master. The young man runs his fingers along the wheat, lost in thought. Also, there are so many holes in Father's stories. His mind drifts back to the portrait hanging inside their home. The founder of the family, the idolized figure in the portrait, the imposing warrior holding a sword stares down from the painting. No matter how much I look, he doesn't resemble my father and me at all. The blade, passed down through generations, gleams in the darkness. Even the sword that's been passed down the family. For something supposedly made hundreds of years ago, it's way too sharp and intact. Stacks of history books lie open across a desk. And most damningly, not a single history book in the kingdom mentions the name of our alleged ancestor, Liam Caravan. The young man lies across the table surrounded by documents, searching through every page. I couldn't find it mentioned even once. He stands alone in the open field, staring into the wide blue sky. Considering all that, there's only one conclusion. They're just tall tales made up to give us descendants something to be proud of. A voice suddenly calls out from behind him. "Young master, what are you doing standing there zoning out?" He turns his head toward the villagers gathered nearby. One of them waves with a big grin. "It's time for our snack break." The workers laugh and gesture for him to come over. "If you don't hurry, all the warm bread will be gone."
"If you come later, I'll eat all of them myself." "What? Wait up!" The young master quickly runs after the villagers, who are already rushing toward their snack break, the wheat field stretching endlessly behind them. One of the farmers stuffs food into his mouth, while another happily eats beside him, crumbs flying everywhere as they laugh together. Arhan watches the scene with a relaxed smile under the bright sky. So what if Caravan is in a great family? Oh my! He walks through the golden field, boots brushing the wheat as the breeze passes through. Everyone here welcomes me. His steps splash lightly through a small puddle on the dirt path. And I love this place where I can live with them. He begins running toward the villagers waiting for him in the distance. That's the Caravan I want, just like how things are now. But suddenly, the peaceful image shatters. Blood spreads across the ground as a hand reaches out desperately. A villager screams in terror while a lone figure stands in the distance beneath the dark sky. Drops of blood fall from broken wheat stalks. Or so I thought in my peaceful and complacent state. Time passes, and the warm colors of sunset return. Arhan sits atop a horse as the villagers gather around him. "Looks like I've harvested enough for today, so I'm gonna head to the market in the neighboring town." He smiles down at them warmly. "I was thinking of picking up anything you guys need while I'm there." One villager scratches his head awkwardly. "Would Kun like some apples? He's been grumbling about not having seen any fruit for a while, right?" "Oh, that would be great, young master." Another woman clasps her hands together happily. "And Marino's youngest daughter's birthday is coming up soon, so I'll buy her a pretty doll if I see one." She looks surprised. "Oh? How did you know that?" Arhan grins confidently. "I know everything." He chuckles lightly. "I'm gonna be the next lord around here, you know." The villagers laugh and wave as he rides away toward the mountains glowing under the sunset. "All right, I'm off. See you all later." Hands rise into the air as they shout after him. "Have a safe trip, young Master Arhan." The wind rushes through his hair as he rides forward with a bright smile, full of excitement for the road ahead. The golden wheat field sways gently beneath the sunset, the warm light of evening spreading across the mountains as the wind rustles through the crops. "There's no one like our young master." A villager smiles proudly as they watch the road Arhan disappeared down. "You're right, he's so different from other nobles." "I'm worried some noble lady will try to snatch him up." Wahaha. The villagers chuckle together, enjoying the peaceful moment. "Well then, before it gets too late, let's finish up the rest of our work." One of them smiles as he turns to continue the day's tasks. Today's the day we have a regular meeting with them. Suddenly, a thin line flashes across his face. In the next instant, blood explodes into the air. His body splits apart before he even realized what happened. The woman nearby reaches out in confusion. "Lord?" Blood sprays across the air and her face as she stares forward in shock. "Kun?" Her eyes tremble as she slowly looks at the blood covering her hands. "Huh?" The wheat field becomes stained red as droplets of blood fall onto the stalks. A cold voice echoes from above the fields. "This land must be erased." A cloaked figure stands in the crimson light of the sunset, sword in hand, walking slowly through the field. The villagers freeze in terror. Two men stare at the approaching figure, sweat pouring down their faces. One of them stammers, his voice trembling. "Why are you?" The villagers stand frozen in the wheat field as the cloaked figure approaches slowly through the crimson light of sunset. The stranger's long hair sways behind him as he walks forward, sword hanging loosely in his hand. This land. Before anyone can react, a flash of crimson streaks across the air. Thin lines of light slice through the villagers like invisible blades. Blood bursts out instantly as bodies collapse before they even understand what happened. The killer's expression remains completely cold. Blood sprays across the sky behind him. This land must be erased. He continues walking through the field, leaving a trail of blood behind him as the peaceful village turns into a slaughter ground. Night falls. On the dark road outside the village, apples tumble from a sack and bounce across the dirt. A small stuffed doll falls beside them. The items Arhan had bought for the villagers scatter across the ground. A pair of boots stops in front of them. Arhan's breath trembles. "Everyone?" His voice shakes as he stares ahead at the horrifying scene. Bodies lie scattered across the ground, blood soaking the earth under the cold moonlight. He stands there frozen. Why? His eyes tremble as he looks around at the corpses of the people who had been laughing hours ago. Why is everyone dead? Suddenly, a large hand grabs him from behind. An old man with scarred face pulls him tightly into his arms, covering the boy's eyes. "Don't look, young master." The old servant shakes with grief as he shields Arhan from the nightmare in front of them. Arhan struggles slightly, confused and frightened. "Butler?" The old servant holds him tighter in the dark field, surrounded by the bodies of the villagers. Arhan trembles in the darkness, unable to process the nightmare in front of him. "Butler, something's wrong." His voice shakes uncontrollably. I must be seeing things." Tears stream down the old butler's face as he holds the boy tightly. "The villagers! The villagers!" Arhan's voice breaks under the weight of what he's witnessing. The old man lowers his head grimly. "He came." Arhan freezes, saying that the caravan should be erased. In the wheat field behind them, bodies lie scattered across the ground under the crimson sky. And it had all happened unbelievably fast. It only took 10 minutes. A flash of steel tears through the air. The white-haired swordsman moves like a phantom, his blade cutting down anyone in his path without hesitation. Wielding his blade with cold indifference, villagers run desperately through the streets, screaming in terror, but the swordsman walks calmly behind them. A man appeared without warning. His blade swings once, bodies collapse, blood sprays across the road. In that time, he took the lives of half the villagers. The sword slices again, and the shockwave alone shatters rooftops and walls around him. Debris explodes into the sky as buildings collapse. The white-haired man walks through the destruction without even slowing down.
His cold eyes look forward without emotion. I'm just following orders. And just like that, half of caravan fell and was erased without a trace. In the distance, flames begin to consume the village. By a single disaster, fire spreads across the homes, devouring everything the villagers once built. And at the center of it all, a swordsmaster.
Under the pale glow of the full moon, the caravan mansion stood silently against the night sky. The wind drifted through the clouds as the estate rested peacefully, unaware of the horror that had already begun. Inside the mansion, the massive front doors creaked open. The marble floor was stained with blood. Bodies of guards and servants lay scattered across the hall, their lifeless forms surrounded by trails of crimson that stretched across the tiles. Two figures walked through the open doorway, stepping calmly into the blood-soaked hall as if the massacre around them meant nothing. Amidst this terrible, unexpected disaster, a young boy named Arhan stood frozen in the middle of the room. His small body trembled as he stared at the lifeless body lying at his feet. Father, the man who had always stood strong, now lay motionless on the floor. Arhan's breath became shallow. His lips trembled. Gasp. The reality of what he was seeing slowly crushed his heart. Around him were more bodies, guards who once protected the house, now lying still in pools of blood. The young boy clutched his head, his mind spiraling into panic. Ah! Ah! The pain, the fear, the shock, everything overwhelmed him at once. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he tried desperately to understand what had happened. Then suddenly, a voice echoed through the hall. Arhan! Arhan lifted his tear-filled eyes. Running toward him through the doorway was his mother. Her hair flowed behind her as she rushed across the hall, fear written across her face. Mother? For a moment, hope flickered inside the boy's broken heart. She reached him and immediately pulled him into a tight embrace. Her arms wrapped around him protectively as she held him close. You're safe, my son. Her voice trembled as tears filled her eyes. She held him tightly, as if trying to shield him from the nightmare surrounding them. I'm so glad. Arhan buried his face in her shoulder, his small body shaking as he cried. In that moment, surrounded by death and chaos, the warmth of his mother's embrace became the only thing keeping him from completely breaking. In that moment, the warmth of his mother's embrace brought Arhan a fleeting sense of relief. For a brief second, the terror surrounding him seemed to fade away. The blood, the bodies, the nightmare that had swallowed the mansion, none of it mattered while he was in her arms. But then, Arhan lowly lifted his head, and that's when he realized something. They were not alone. Standing in the distance, beneath the towering doors of the blood-soaked hall, was a man. Arhan's father collapsed to his knees, his hands trembling as he stared helplessly at the figure before him. His voice cracked with grief and confusion. Why? Why this was happening? Why their family? Why their home? The question echoed through the ruined hall. But the tragedy had only just begun. The silver-haired swordsman looked down at them without the slightest hint of emotion. For some reason, the man who had slaughtered countless people did not kill Arhan's parents. Instead, he calmly spoke a single sentence. I will return in a month. His voice was cold and absolute. If you wish to live. The blade in his hand reflected the crimson glow of the setting sun. Leave this place with everyone by then. And just like that, he turned away, leaving behind a mansion filled with blood and a family drowning in despair. Arhan's father gripped a sword tightly, tears streaming down his face. His entire body shook as rage and grief consumed him.
Why us?" His voice broke. Then suddenly he screamed, "Why are you doing this?" Tears poured from his eyes as he shouted into the darkness. "What crime did we ever commit?" But the swordsmaster never answered, and the silence that followed was far more terrifying than any reply. Arhan's father knelt on the blood-soaked ground, gripping his sword as his entire body trembled. Tears streamed down his face as he stared at the silver-haired man standing before him. His voice cracked with pain. "What?" His hands tightened around the sword. "Why?" The man responsible for the massacre lowly lifted his head. His cold, crimson eyes showed no anger, no hatred, not even satisfaction, only emptiness. For a moment, silence filled the air. Then finally, the swordsman spoke. "I am just." He paused briefly. "Following orders." That was it. No explanation, no justification. Just those words. Following orders. After leaving behind those incomprehensible words, the swordsman disappeared, leaving the caravan territory drowning in blood and despair. In the days that followed, fear spread throughout the village. One by one, the surviving villagers began packing their belongings. Families loaded their carts. Others led their horses down the dusty roads as the sun began to set behind them. They had no choice. Leaving their home was the only way to survive. But Arhan's family was never given that choice. Inside the dark mansion, silence filled the halls. The old, proud estate now felt empty and suffocating. Arhan's father stood alone in his study. The weight of everything that had happened crushed down on him. The responsibility of protecting his land, his people, his family, and yet he had failed. His hands trembled as he spoke to himself, trying to hold on to the pride he once had. "I am the great knight who hunts nightmares." His voice shook as blood trickled from his mouth. "The iron-blooded guardian who protects the kingdom." But even those words sounded hollow now. His body swayed as exhaustion and despair overwhelmed him. Still, he forced himself to stand. Because despite everything, despite the fear, despite the hopelessness consuming him, he refused to give up. Through blood-stained lips, he whispered one final vow. "I will not abandon this."
Beneath the quiet moonlight of the forest, Arhan's mother gently called his name. "Arhan." Her voice was calm, but there was a sadness hidden within it. She placed her hands on his shoulders and looked directly into his tearful eyes. "I've instructed the butler to prepare a carriage." The wind softly moved through the trees as she continued. "You will leave the territory with him and go as far away as possible." Arhan's eyes widened in shock. "What are you saying?" His voice trembled as tears streamed down his face. "You have to leave too!" He grabbed her arms desperately. "And father too! We'll take him with us and go together!" But she slowly shook her head. Her expression was gentle, yet painfully firm. "Your father cannot leave this place." She turned her gaze toward the distant mansion standing in the darkness. "Because until the very end, he will want to face the enemy as the Lord of Caravan." For a moment, silence filled the air. Then she added quietly, "And as his partner, I will be with him until that moment." Arhan's heart shattered. "No, please, mother!" His voice cracked as he pleaded. "Please, let's all go together." But she simply smiled at him with sadness in her eyes. "Remember this, Arhan." Later that night, she stood beside him in front of a massive portrait hanging in the mansion hall. The portrait showed his father in shining armor, gripping a sword like a legendary hero. Arhan had always believed in that image, the great knight, the fearless protector. But his mother spoke softly. "The stories your father told you are not true." Arhan looked up in confusion.
All those tales of a righteous guardian, an invincible protector, she lowered her eyes, are nothing more than history filled with lies. Tears rolled down Arhan's cheeks as he struggled to understand. Then his mother gently held his face and made him look at her. Her voice trembled with desperation. "So won't you make a promise to your mother?" Her grip tightened slightly as she spoke the words she feared the most. "Promise me you'll never pick up a sword in your life." The night wind rustled the trees around them. Her eyes filled with tears. "Promise me you'll survive, no matter what." Arhan's mother gently held his face, wiping away the tears that streamed down his cheeks. Her voice was soft but filled with desperate love. "Don't even think about revenge." Her fingers trembled slightly as she spoke. "Just live for yourself." The quiet night wind passed through the forest as she tried to hold back her own tears. But suddenly, a voice echoed from behind them. "Lady, the carriage is ready." The butler had arrived. Arhan tightened his grip on his mother's arm. He didn't want to let go. He couldn't. But his mother slowly pulled his hands away and turned toward the butler. Her expression was calm, yet filled with sorrow. "Butler, please take good care of Arhan." She paused for a moment before adding firmly, "Make sure he gets as far away before that man comes." The old butler lowered his head respectfully. "Yes, my lady." Then he grabbed Arhan's arm and began pulling him away. Arhan struggled desperately. "No, mother!" His voice cracked as he tried to run back to her, but the butler held him tightly. Arhan screamed with everything he had. "Mother!" His mother stood quietly beneath the moonlight. She didn't run after him. She didn't call him back. Instead, she simply watched him go, her expression gentle and peaceful. The butler dragged the crying boy down the dark forest road. "You must go, young master!" But Arhan continued screaming, reaching his hand toward her. "Mother!" Far away, under the silver light of the moon, his mother stood alone. Her dress moved softly in the wind as leaves drifted through the air. A small, sad smile appeared on her face. Then she whispered the final words she would ever say to him. "I love you, my child." Meanwhile, inside the silent mansion, Arhan's father slowly walked through the ruined library. Books were scattered across the floor. Blood dripped down his face, yet his footsteps never stopped. One by one, the sounds of his steps echoed through the empty hall. The night of tragedy was far from over. Inside the dark and silent mansion library, Arhan's father staggered forward. Books lay scattered across the wooden floor, and the once noble lord leaned heavily against a pillar. Blood slowly ran down his face. His breathing was rough and uneven, yet he forced himself to remain standing. Then, suddenly, a pair of gentle arms wrapped around him from behind. It was his wife. She pressed her forehead softly against his back, holding him tightly. Her voice was calm, yet filled with quiet sorrow. "Stop suffering alone, dear." The exhausted lord closed his eyes. For a moment, the burden crushing his heart seemed to grow lighter. His wife held him even closer. "At least until the end," she whispered softly. "I'll be with you." Meanwhile, far away from the mansion, a small carriage moved through the dark forest road. The wheels rattled as the horse pulled them deeper into the night. Inside the carriage, the old butler drove in silence, his expression heavy with grief. After a while, he finally spoke. "Young master, I know this is painfully devastating." The wind rushed past them as the carriage continued down the lonely road. The old man sighed deeply. "But that man is a calamity." His hands tightened around the reins. "He is like a natural disaster. A force beyond human power, something no one could possibly defeat. You must accept this tragedy for what it is." His voice became softer. "And forget it if you wish to continue living." He paused before adding quietly, That is what your father and mother would have wanted." The carriage moved faster down the dark road. The old butler looked ahead into the forest and finished his sentence. "So you can live on." But suddenly, he felt something strange. The reins loosened in his hands. The carriage jerked violently. The old man's eyes widened in shock. "Young master?" The carriage had barely gone far when suddenly Arhan clenched his fists. His heart pounded violently in his chest. "No matter how I think about it." Before the butler could react, Arhan jumped down from the moving carriage and sprinted back down the forest road. Leaves scattered beneath his feet as he ran with everything he had. "I can't leave on my own." His breath grew heavier with every step. His mind was filled with only one thought: how could I just leave my parents behind like this? The night wind whipped past him as he ran faster and faster. He refused to accept it. "I can't just run away by myself." Even if the enemy was a monster, even if everyone called him a calamity. Arhan clenched his teeth. They call him a disaster, but he's still just a man. His hand reached behind his back. Strapped to him was a strange mechanical weapon, a crossbow, one he had secretly prepared over the last month. Attached to it were small glass vials filled with a deadly liquid, deadly poison. Arhan's eyes hardened. Like us, he's still a man who will die if an arrow pierces his heart. The mansion slowly appeared ahead in the distance beneath the red sky. Arhan gripped the crossbow tightly. "If I can just shoot him with this," his heart filled with desperate hope, "I can protect them." But the moment he stepped into the mansion grounds, Arhan suddenly froze. His eyes widened in shock. Right in front of him, a blade, standing silently in the air. Before he could even react, slash! A crimson line flashed through the darkness. Blood splattered across the ground. Arhan's body collapsed forward. His crossbow slipped from his hands, and the world slowly faded into darkness. The crimson sky hung heavy over the ruined estate. At the very top of the manor, the wind whipped violently around a tall flagpole. The banner of the territory fluttered in the blood-red dusk, but beneath it, something far more horrifying swayed in the wind. A woman's lifeless body, Arhan's mother. Her head hung forward, her long hair drifting softly in the air as blood trailed down the pole. The symbol of the family waved behind her like a cruel mockery of the home that once stood proudly beneath it. Below, in the courtyard, the killer stood calmly. His feet lay another body, discarded like nothing more than debris. His cold voice broke the silence. How foolish. Not far away, Arhan stood frozen. The boy's body trembled as he stared at the nightmare before him. The swordsmaster slowly turned his head towards him, pale hair shifting in the wind. His calm expression remained completely emotionless. To him, this entire tragedy meant nothing. His crimson eye glowed faintly. "I showed you mercy, yet—" Before he could finish, Arhan's vision blurred with rage. The world around him turned white, his teeth clenched, his throat tearing open with a scream born from pure hatred. He raised the crossbow with shaking hands. Below his feet lay his mother's lifeless body, blood staining the ground around her. Her lips slightly parted. A faint breath escaped her broken body. But Arhan no longer heard anything. All he saw was the man who destroyed his life. His finger tightened on the trigger. With a feral scream that ripped through the courtyard, "I'll kill you!" The bolt fired, and the boy roared one final word at the monster standing before him. "Die!" Yet the swordsmaster did not move. His single glowing eye stared forward, calm and unshaken. Arhan pulled the trigger with all the hatred in his heart. The crossbow bolt shot forward, cutting through the air straight toward the swordsmaster. But before it could even reach him, a flash of steel moved faster than the eye could see. Clang! The swordsmaster's blade struck the bolt mid-air, knocking it aside effortlessly. The poisoned arrow spun uselessly across the ground. Arhan's eyes widened. The crossbow slipped from his trembling hands and clattered against the dirt. The world seemed to tilt around him. His chest tightened. Gah! His breath came out ragged as he clutched at his throat. Gah! Foam formed at the corner of his mouth. The poison he had prepared so carefully was now taking effect on the one who handled it, his own body collapsing under the strain. Through blurred vision, he saw the swordsmaster begin to walk toward him. Slow, unhurried, completely calm. The tall man stopped beside the kneeling boy, his long silver hair swaying softly in the evening wind. The sword in his hand gleamed coldly in the fading red light. He looked down at Arhan with indifferent eyes. "You're not even 18 yet." Arhan trembled violently on the ground, barely able to breathe. The swordsmaster turned slightly, his cloak flowing behind him. "Consider yourself lucky." His voice was flat. "I won't take your life today." The blade lowered to his side. "Go and drown in your despair." The man stepped away as if the matter was already finished. Arhan knelt there shaking, tears mixing with sweat and poison as the weight of everything crushed down on him. Behind him, the swordsmaster spoke one final warning. "Not a single trace of Caravan's bloodline will remain on this continent." Arhan's teeth clenched. His entire body trembled. The swordsmaster's crimson eyes narrowed slightly. "And if you dare to continue that bloodline," he glanced back over his shoulder. A cold smile touched his lips. "I will find you again." The man slowly walked away, disappearing into the deepening shadows of the forest. The courtyard fell silent. Only 2 bodies remained on the blood-stained ground. Arhan collapsed forward, crawling weakly across the dirt toward the lifeless figure lying nearby. His mother. Her head tilted lifelessly to the side, eyes half closed, blood staining the corner of her mouth. Arhan leaned over her, his face trembling as tears fell on her pale skin. "So utterly pathetic." His voice shook as he looked at her, guilt crushing his chest. He had come to save them, but in the end, he had done nothing. A pained groan escaped him. "Ah!" With shaking arms, he pulled her into his embrace, cradling her body desperately as if warmth might somehow return. But her body was already cold. Far away, hidden in the darkness, someone watched the scene unfold. Arhan's broken cry echoed into the night. "Anna!" And the truth settled deep into his heart. That day, he lost everything. His family, his home, his name, his future. Everything. At least, that's what he believed. But in the silent darkness, something began to stir. A sword lying forgotten on the ground suddenly shimmered. Soft blue light flowed around its blade, like living water. Energy gathered around it, swirling gently through the air. The weapon hummed quietly, responding to something unseen. Then the light burst outward. Arhan looked up suddenly, his tear-filled eyes widening in shock as a voice echoed above him. "Arhan Caravan, show some respect." The air rippled with ancient power. The glowing light formed into the figure of a tall man with a thick beard and commanding presence. His form shimmered like a spirit woven from pure energy. He looked down at the boy calmly. His eyes carried both authority and familiarity. Then he spoke. "My descendant." A year passed beneath the silent watch of the moon.
High above the territory, the full moon hung in the sky, casting pale light over the abandoned caravan estate. The once proud manor stood quiet and hollow, its towers and rooftops bathed in cold blue light. During that year, Arhan gathered everyone who still remained in the territory and kept them close, refusing to let the remnants of caravans scatter completely. But while the world slowly moved on, Arhan did not. Every day, every night, his thoughts burned with a single purpose: revenge. He spent that year preparing for it. His mind returned again and again to the man who destroyed everything. The strongest blade on the continent. A guardian said to protect the peace of kingdoms. A righteous warrior praised for destroying evil. A transcendent swordsman whose talents surpassed all others. The master of the 10 swords. Carlos. That was the name of the man who took everything from him. Yet the more Arhan searched, the more questions appeared. Nothing made sense. Why would someone like Carlos slaughter his family? Why Caravan? What crime had they committed? And above all, who had given the order? Papers, letters, and old records covered the desk in the quiet study room. Arhan had spent countless nights reading through every document he could find, searching for even the smallest clue. But every path led to a dead end. The answers refused to reveal themselves. Still, one truth remained undeniable. No matter the reason, the people of Caravan who died that day would never return. Outside, the sun slowly rose over the mountains, its light spilling across rows of graves standing silently in the field. A grave for each life that had been taken. Arhan stood alone in the manor, staring into the empty hall. Then suddenly, a faint sound echoed. Tap. A soft blue light flickered from the side of the room. Arhan turned his head toward it, confusion filling his eyes. The strange glow illuminated the wall as if something unseen had appeared inside the hall. He stared at it, stunned. A cold thought crossed his mind. Had he finally lost his sanity after chasing an unsolvable mystery for an entire year? The blue light continued to shine, and Arhan could only watch it in silence, unsure whether what he was seeing was real or the beginning of madness. A faint blue glow began to swirl in the air. The sword lying nearby trembled as streams of light flowed around it like living currents. Energy spiraled upward, filling the room with a quiet, humming power. Arhan stood frozen, staring as the light intensified. Then suddenly, something appeared within the glow. A towering figure formed inside the swirling energy, his outline slowly becoming clear. A man. Old yet powerful in presence. A thick beard framed his stern face, and a heavy fur mantle rested over his shoulders like that of a king or warlord. The air around him pulsed with ancient authority. Arhan's breath caught in his throat as the figure looked down at him. A deep voice echoed through the glowing currents. "Show respect, Arhan Caravan." The man's gaze was steady and commanding. "My descendant." Arhan's eyes widened. The figure before him was unmistakable. The same man from the old portrait that hung in the manor, the legendary ancestor spoken of in Caravan's history. The very stories Arhan had once believed were nothing more than lies. Now that ancestor stood before him, formed from swirling blue light. Arhan's mind struggled to process it. Everything he had dismissed as fantasy, everything he thought was nothing but myth, now stood alive before him. Rain tapped softly against the windows of the manor as silence filled the room. Arhan swallowed hard. He had heard about this before. Sometimes people who suffer severe psychological trauma were said to see visions, hallucinations born from a shattered mind. But as he looked at the glowing figure standing before him, the power in the air was too overwhelming, too real. This was no simple illusion. The ancient man studied him quietly for a moment before speaking again, his voice calm yet heavy with meaning. "I sense turmoil in your heart." The swirling blue energy continued to flow around them as the past and present began to collide inside the silent hall. The glowing figure looked down at Arhan with calm, piercing eyes. His voice was steady, almost curious. Was the boy frightened because he believed he had finally lost his mind? Or was he simply shocked that the ancestor he had dismissed as nothing more than legend had appeared before him? Arhan stood stiffly under the dim light of the hall, his heart pounding. If this wasn't an illusion, if this truly was real, then there was only one possibility. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. Was the man before him truly the founder of their family, the greatest swordsman in Caravan's history, Liam Caravan? The old warrior's expression did not change. He simply gazed down at his descendant, his presence alone filling the room with an almost suffocating weight. Arhan clenched his fists. If the heroic tales his father used to tell were true, if this legendary ancestor truly existed, then why? Why appear now? His voice cracked as years of anger burst out of him. Why? His shout echoed through the empty hall. His eyes burned with fury and pain. Why only now? For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Liam finally spoke. He had not appeared randomly. For the past year, he had been watching Arhan. Revenge, he explained, was a cruel and merciless path, one that should never be taken unless a person was prepared to abandon everything. That was why he waited. He needed to see whether the boy truly intended to walk that road. And during that entire year, Arhan had never let go of his sword. The ancestor had seen it all. The relentless training, the sleepless nights, the obsession with vengeance that consumed him every day. But even after witnessing all that, Liam's verdict was cold. Despite having a spark of talent, what Arhan currently possessed was nothing more than something trivial, something utterly hopeless.
The boy grips the sword tightly, sweat running down his face, his eyes burning with determination. Your will, that never once wavered. The old man stands before him, inside the quiet hall. You asked why I only appeared now. The answer is simple. His gaze sharpens. The hatred in those eyes has finally reached the depth I desired. A cold pause follows. And also, my patience has reached its limit. My bloodlust to tear apart the one who mercilessly slaughtered my descendants and the people of my territory. The old man turns, his cloak flowing behind him. In the history of this continent, there exists a truth that has never once been disproven. A swordmaster can only be killed by another swordmaster. He reaches out his hand. You know this too, which is why you foolishly swung your sword and vowed revenge. The boy looks at him stunned. However, even if you trained your entire life alone, you could never reach him. The sky fills with stars as the words echo like a legend. A swordmaster is a transcendent being beyond the category of human, a supreme realm that even those called geniuses cannot fathom. High above the clouds, a brilliant star shines alone.
and among swordmasters, he stands at an unreachably high place as a transcendent. Rain falls beneath a quiet night sky. Even in my era of war, there were very few with such skill. No one in the current generation can kill him, and as time passes, he will become even greater. The boy stares ahead, stunned. I know full well the gap between us is vast, but it's beyond difficult? Impossible? So I just have to watch as the bastard who took everything from me becomes a hero? Helpless again this time? The boy struggles for breath, his body trembling. But then a voice cuts through the darkness. But from this moment, the story changes, because I will help you, so you can become a blade sharper and stronger than him. A pair of piercing eyes watches him, so that you, as a caravan, can judge that murderer. A sword hangs before them. There is only one method, the sole path that only caravan can walk. The old man declares, "Devour my sword." The boy looks up in shock, descendant who inherited the steel blood. In the dim forge, the sound of metal echoes. Tat, tat, tat. Flames roar inside the forge as a blade is thrust into the fire. The burning metal glows bright within the furnace. The caravan bloodline is mixed with human and dwarf blood. The boy stands before the blazing sword, its heated blade shining in the flames. The old man speaks beside him. It originated from me, a dwarf half-breed. Though the physical traits of dwarves don't show, through that blood a special ability has been passed down to descendants. The swords begin to appear, floating in a vast dark space. That ability is to consume blades, or more precisely, swords, and make the memories and techniques of their wielder your own. More swords gather above them, shining with power. That is the source of power that allowed Caravan to produce swordmasters generation after generation and stand tall as a great The boy's eyes narrow with doubt. Devouring swords to inherit power. Dwarves being friends of steel and fire is famous, but I've never heard of such a strange ability. He grips the sword, still unsure. Everything sounds absurd, stories that only confuse me. He lowers his head beside the blazing forge. However, truth can only be proven by results. I have no choice called hesitation. He raises his eyes, determination burning in them. Tell me how to consume the sword. The old man begins to explain. The consumption method is, just heat the sword until the blade softens enough, then chew and swallow it. The boy grips the glowing blade, steam and heat rising around him. Sweat runs down his face. Right now, I might be trapped in a nightmare, gone mad. I might be possessed by a mere phantom. But between those possibilities, his eyes sharpen with fierce resolve. If there's even the slightest chance, he opens his mouth and shouts, "I will do it!" With a violent bite, his teeth slam down onto the burning sword. Gah! The burning blade tears through his mouth as flames surge around him. Gah! Gah! Fire erupts violently from his body. Gah! The flames spiral upward, engulfing him completely as his scream echoes. The blazing sword slips from his hand. Gang! He is hurled backward, his body slamming into the stone floor. Ah! The ground cracks beneath him. Ah! His body trembles violently. Grr! Grr! Pain twists across his face. Grr! A tear runs down from his eye. Then a voice echoes in the darkness. Remember. In the darkness of his mind, a memory appears, a lone figure standing among lifeless bodies. Again the voice repeats, Remember. Another memory surfaces. Remember. Remember! The word crashes through his mind like thunder. A face flashes in the darkness, long pale hair falling over cold eyes, blood splattered across the cheek. The command echoes again and again, forcing the memory to the surface. Remember. His body twitches. A single hand hangs limp in the void, trembling slightly, as if deciding whether to move or surrender. Then, clench. His fingers snap shut around the sword. Power surges. The blade erupts with a violent flash of light as his grip tightens, the metal screaming under the sudden force. Crack! His teeth grit together, jaw locking as energy bursts outward. Flames and sparks swirl around him. Through the storm of heat and pressure, he forces himself upright. I will succeed! Even as the flames burn his body and the pressure threatens to crush him, he refuses to stop. Even if it kills me, I will succeed. His eyes blaze with desperate determination. He raises the sword, gripping it with both hands as the burning aura spirals around him like a storm. I will become one. The blade glows brighter. His voice hardens into a vow. A swordmaster who will kill him.